The sound of iron wheels clattering against stone woke Lillian Keating from her fitful slumber. Her body ached from the endless jostling of the wagon, and the coarse ropes binding her wrists had rubbed her skin raw. 17 days had passed since she'd been forced onto this westbound journey, 17 days of dust, thirst, and the growing dread of what awaited her at journey's end. "Rise and shine, property," barked the wagon master, a sour-faced man named Wilkes. "We'll reach Fort Bowie by sundown." Lillian struggled to sit upright on the hard wooden bench. At 22, she had never imagined her life would come to this, sold into servitude to pay her late father's gambling debts, shipped across the country like cargo to serve some unknown master in the Arizona Territory. The year was 1876, and while many considered themselves enlightened in this centennial year of American independence, the practice of indentured servitude still persisted in shadowy corners of society. "Water," she croaked, her throat parched from the desert air. Wilkes tossed her a canteen with barely an inch of warm liquid sloshing inside. "Make it last. Next water's at Dragoon Springs." Lillian's once fine dress hung in tatters around her slender frame. Her golden hair, which had once been her pride, was now matted with dust and tied back with a scrap of cloth. She took a small sip of water, letting it moisten her cracked lips before allowing herself to swallow. The other women in the wagon, 3 of them, all bound for domestic servitude in frontier households, sat in defeated silence. They'd stopped crying days ago. Lillian had stopped too, but not because she'd given up hope. Something fierce still burned within her, a determination that would not be extinguished. "Who's buying us?" asked Mary, the youngest of the group at barely 18. "Don't matter to you," Wilkes spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the ground. "You'll work off your contracts if it takes 20 years. Lillian stared out at the vast landscape. The Arizona Territory stretched endlessly before them, red rock formations, scattered cacti, and a sky so blue it hurt to look at it. In another time, she might have found it beautiful. Now it looked like prison walls. As the day wore on, the heat became nearly unbearable. The wagon climbed steadily through rocky terrain, following what Wilkes called the overland mail route. Occasionally, they passed other travelers' mail coaches, soldiers from the nearby fort, and once a small band of Apache who watched them with impassive faces before disappearing into the hills. By late afternoon, Lillian could make out buildings in the distance. Fort Bowie, situated strategically in Apache Pass, was more than just a military outpost. It had become a small settlement where civilization clung tenaciously to the edges of wilderness. "Remember your place," Wilkes warned as they approached. "Any trouble and you'll regret it." The wagon slowed as they reached a crossroads about a mile outside the fort. Unexpectedly, Wilkes pulled the horses to a stop. Lillian followed his gaze and saw a lone rider approaching from the direction of the fort. The man rode a tall chestnut horse, his silhouette backlit by the setting sun. As he came closer, Lillian could make out his features tall and broad-shouldered, with a sun-bronzed face partially shaded by a wide-brimmed hat. He wore the practical clothes of a cattleman, not a soldier's uniform, and the easy way he sat his horse spoke of a lifetime spent in the saddle. "Wilkes," the man called out, his voice carrying across the distance. "Thought I might find you on this road today." The wagon master's face darkened. "Iverson, this ain't your business." Lillian watched as the rider Iverson drew his horse alongside the wagon. From this distance, she could see his eyes were a startling blue against his weathered skin. "Actually," said Iverson, "I believe it is." He shifted in his saddle to address the women directly. "Ladies, I'm Isaac Iverson. I own the Double Circle Ranch north of here. And I'm here to tell you something important." His eyes settled on Lillian, and something in his gaze made her heart beat faster. "You're free now." Wilkes lunged for the rifle tucked beside his seat, but Iverson was faster. The cattleman's revolver appeared in his hand as if by magic. "I wouldn't," Iverson said quietly. Sheriff Palmer's about half a mile back with some of the boys from the fort. We've been waiting for you. These women are under legal contract, Wilkes protested. Those contracts wouldn't stand up in any proper court, Iverson replied. And Judge Holbrook agrees with me. We've had enough of your kind bringing indentured workers through our territory. Lillian could scarcely believe what she was hearing. Free, could it be possible? She glanced at the other women who looked equally stunned. You can't just, Wilkes began. I can and I am, Iverson cut him off. He holstered his pistol and pulled a folded paper from his vest. This is a legal writ from Judge Holbrook declaring any such contracts null and void in Arizona territory. These women are free to go where they please. As if on cue, the sound of approaching horses announced the arrival of several riders. A grizzled man wearing a sheriff's badge led them, followed by 2 soldiers in blue uniforms. Everything all right here, Isaac? The sheriff called. Just explaining the law to Mr. Wilkes, Sheriff, Iverson replied, his eyes never leaving the wagon master. What happened next unfolded with surprising speed. The sheriff and his men disarmed Wilkes and his assistant. The ropes binding the women were cut, and they were helped down from the wagon. Lillian stood on trembling legs, hardly daring to believe this sudden turn of events. She rubbed her chafed wrists, wincing at the pain. Are you hurt, miss? Iverson had dismounted and now stood before her, concern evident in his expression. I'm well enough, she managed. Is it true? We're truly free. As any American has a right to be, he said with conviction. No one can be bought and sold in this territory, not while decent folks have anything to say about it. Lillian felt tears welling in her eyes, the first she'd allowed herself in many days. Thank you, Mr. Iverson. Isaac, he corrected gently. Then more practically, you ladies will need somewhere to stay. Fort Bowie has a small hotel and Mrs. Daniels, who runs it, is a good woman. She can help you figure out your next steps. The sheriff approached them. Isaac's right. We've got work available in town for those willing. The territories need good people, especially those with education. He looked at Lillian's group appraisingly. But you'll come as free citizens, not servants. As the group made their way toward Fort Bowie, Lillian found herself walking beside Isaac Iverson. There were 1,000 questions she wanted to ask, but one pressed most urgently. Why did you do this, Mr. Iverson? Why help strangers? He was quiet for a long moment. My mother came west as an indentured servant 30 years ago, he finally said. She didn't find her freedom until much later, and at great cost. I swore I'd never let that happen to another person if I could help it. They crested a small rise, and Fort Bowie came into full view, a cluster of adobe and wooden buildings surrounding the military installation. Beyond it stretched the vastness of the Arizona landscape, wild and beautiful in the golden light of sunset. Welcome to Arizona territory, miss. Keating, she supplied. Lillian Keating. Welcome to Arizona, Miss Keating, Isaac said with a small smile. It's a hard land, but it's a free one. As they walked toward the settlement, Lillian felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Whatever tomorrow might bring, today she was free. Fort Bowie in 1876 was a curious mixture of military precision and frontier chaos. The fort itself stood as a bastion of order, neat rows of buildings, soldiers drilling in the yard, the American flag snapping in the constant wind. But around it had grown a small settlement that followed the more organic patterns of civilian life. A general store, livery stable, hotel, and the inevitable saloon. Mrs. Daniels, the hotel proprietress, was a stout woman with keen eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She welcomed the 4 women with practical kindness, showing them to a shared room with real beds, the first Lillian had seen in weeks. You poor dears look half-starved, Mrs. Daniels clucked. Wash up, and I'll have food waiting downstairs. The simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread that followed was the most delicious thing Lillian had tasted in memory. As they ate, Sheriff Palmer explained their situation more fully. Judge Holbrook has been working to stop these indentured transports, he told them. What they're doing skirts the law close enough that some territories turn a blind eye, but not here. Not anymore. What happens to us now? Asked Clara, the oldest of their group at 25. That's for you to decide, the sheriff replied. You're free women. Fort Bowie needs teachers, seamstresses, cooks, all manner of skilled hands. Lillian stirred her stew thoughtfully. And those without skills? Everyone has something to offer, said a voice from the doorway. Isaac Iverson stood there, hat in hand. Pardon the intrusion, Mrs. Daniels. I wanted to check on our new arrivals before heading back to my ranch. Mrs. Daniels waved him in. Always welcome, Isaac. These ladies were just discussing their prospects. Lillian noticed how respectfully everyone treated Iverson. He clearly held some standing in the community beyond just being a rancher. The widow Simmons is looking for help with her bakery, Isaac suggested, and Doc Friedman mentioned needing someone with a steady hand to assist him. By the end of the evening, Clara had secured a position as Mrs. Daniels' assistant at the hotel. Mary would try her hand at the bakery, and Beth would work at the general store. Only Lillian remained uncertain. I was a teacher's assistant in Boston, she admitted, but that seems of little use here. Actually, Isaac said, my sister runs a small school for the children at Double Circle and neighboring ranches. She's expecting her first child and could use help, especially in the coming months. Lillian hesitated. The Double Circle Ranch was an unknown quantity, away from the relative safety of Fort Bowie. Reading her concern, Isaac added, It's a respectable household. My mother and sister would welcome you, and you'd have your own quarters. The position includes room, board, and wages. You're a fortunate woman, Miss Keating, Mrs. Daniels interjected. The Double Circle is one of the finest spreads in the territory, and the Iversons are good people. Something in Isaac's steady gaze made Lillian believe it was true. I would be grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Iverson. Excellent, he said, a smile warming his features. I'll return tomorrow to escort you if that suits. After he departed, the other women teased Lillian gently. Quite handsome, you're Mr. Iverson, Clara remarked. He's not my anything, Lillian protested, though she couldn't deny she had noticed his striking appearance. Not yet, perhaps, Mrs. Daniels said with a knowing smile. Isaac Iverson is 30 years old and the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties. Half the unmarried women in Arizona Territory have set their caps for him, but he's never shown particular interest. I'm sure his interest in me is purely practical, Lillian said firmly. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Lillian allowed herself to truly contemplate her circumstances. Yesterday, she had been property, being transported to a life of servitude. Today, she was free with choices before her. It seemed miraculous. Yet doubt crept in as she drifted toward sleep. What did she know of ranch life? Of teaching frontier children? Of Isaac Iverson and his family? She was trading one unknown for another, stepping into a new world with nothing but the clothes on her back and her own determination. Morning came with startling brightness. After weeks of waking before dawn to continue the journey, Lillian found she had slept until well past sunrise. The hotel was already bustling when she made her way downstairs. Mrs. Daniels pressed a cup of coffee into her hands. Isaac sent word he'll be by at noon. I've put together some essentials for you can't have you starting your new life with nothing. Overcome by this kindness, Lillian could only stammer her thanks. At the Mercantile, the proprietor introducing himself as Harold Turner insisted on advancing her credit for proper clothing. Isaac Iverson's good for it, he explained, and a lady needs more than one dress. By noon, Lillian had a small bundle of possessions, 2 simple dresses, undergarments, a shawl, and basic toiletries. She bid farewell to her companions from the wagon, promising to visit when possible. Isaac arrived precisely at noon, driving a wagon rather than riding. A young boy of about 12 sat beside him. Miss Keating, may I present my nephew, William, Isaac said as he helped Lillian into the wagon. Will's father is my foreman and Will is one of your future pupils. The boy gave her a shy nod. Pleased to meet you, madam. The pleasure is mine, William, she replied, charmed by his politeness. As they left Fort Bowie behind, the landscape opened up around them, vast stretches of desert interspersed with surprising patches of grass and scattered oak trees. In the distance, mountains rose blue against the sky. It's beautiful, Lillian murmured, despite herself. You'll find it grows on you, Isaac said, though it takes some getting used to after the East. How did you know I'm from the East? Your accent, he replied. New England, I'd wager. Boston? Yes, she admitted, surprised. How can you tell? My mother was from Salem originally. Some inflections stay with a person. For the next hour, as the wagon rolled steadily northward, Isaac pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territory. He spoke of the Apache not as savages, but as a proud people defending their homeland. He described cattle drives and the challenges of ranching in this harsh environment. Throughout, William occasionally chimed in with a child's perspective, his initial shyness melting away. How large is your ranch? Lillian asked. 20,000 acres, Isaac answered. Modest by some standards, but we've water rights to Eagle Creek, which makes all the difference. Lillian tried to imagine such vastness under one family's control. Her entire life in Boston had been contained within a few city blocks. As the afternoon progressed, they climbed into higher country. The air grew cooler, and the vegetation changed: more trees, patches of wild grass. Finally, they crested a ridge, and Isaac drew the horses to a halt. Double circle, he said, gesturing to the valley below. Lillian gasped. The ranch spread before them like something from a painting, a large wooden house, and several outbuildings nestled against the backdrop of mountains, with fields and pastures stretching outward. Cattle dotted the landscape, and a creek wound through the property like a silver ribbon. It's magnificent, she breathed. Pride was evident in Isaac's voice. My father started with nothing but a claim and 50 head of longhorn. Took 20 years to build it to what you see now. As they descended into the valley, Lillian noticed more details: corrals with horses, a garden plot beside the main house, what appeared to be a smaller schoolhouse set apart from the other buildings. It was a self-contained world, isolated but complete. Several dogs ran out to greet the wagon, followed by a woman in her 30s. Her resemblance to Isaac was unmistakable, the same blue eyes, though her hair was a lighter brown than his dark locks. Rebecca, Isaac called as he brought the wagon to a stop. I've brought your new assistant. Rebecca Iverson Mitchell's welcome was as warm as her brother's had been reserved. She embraced Lillian as though they were long-lost friends rather than strangers. Thank the Lord, she exclaimed. The children have nearly run me ragged this term. She patted her slightly rounded middle. And this little one isn't making it any easier. William jumped down from the wagon and ran toward another building, presumably to find his friends. Isaac helped Lillian descend, his strong hands steadying her as her feet touched the ground. I'll let Rebecca show you around, he said. I need to speak with Matthew about the north pasture. As Isaac strode away, Rebecca linked her arm through Lillian's. Don't mind my brother, he's always about business. Come inside and meet Mother. The main house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, a sprawling single-story structure built of sturdy logs and native stone. The interior was surprisingly refined, with polished wood floors, actual glass windows, and furniture that wouldn't have looked out of place in a fine Boston home. Eleanor Iverson sat in the parlor, her fingers busy with needlework despite her advanced years. Her face lit up when Rebecca introduced Lillian. At last, the older woman said, setting aside her embroidery. Isaac told us of your ordeal. You're very welcome here, Miss Keating. Please call me Lillian, she replied, immediately drawn to Eleanor's gentle manner. Then you must call me Eleanor. We don't stand on ceremony at Double Circle. Over tea, Lillian learned more about the ranch and its inhabitants. Matthew Mitchell, Rebecca's husband, served as foreman, overseeing the dozen cowboys who worked the cattle. The school had 15 pupils ranging from 6 to 16, children of the ranch hands and neighboring smaller ranches. We started the school 3 years ago, Rebecca explained. Before that, children either went without education or boarded in Fort Bowie. It was Isaac's idea, Eleanor added proudly. He believes strongly in education, though he had little enough formal schooling himself. By evening, Lillian had been shown to a small but comfortable bedroom in the east wing of the house and introduced to Maria, the Mexican woman who served as cook and housekeeper. The household ran with surprising efficiency despite its remote location. Supper was served in a large dining room with Isaac at the head of the table. Matthew Mitchell proved to be a jovial counterpoint to Isaac's more serious demeanor, and the conversation flowed easily. Lillian found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. After the meal, Isaac invited her to step onto the porch. The night was clear, stars blazing with an intensity she'd never seen in Boston. "How are you finding everything?" he asked. "Overwhelming," she admitted. "But in a good way, your family has been most welcoming." Isaac nodded, seemingly pleased. "Rebecca will show you the schoolhouse tomorrow. The children are on holiday this week, so you'll have time to settle in before teaching begins." "Mr. Iverson," Lillian began hesitantly, "I still don't understand why you've done all this." Surely there were qualified teachers closer than Fort Bowie. He was quiet for a long moment, his profile strong against the night sky. "When I saw Wilkes's wagon, I knew exactly what it was carrying. As I told you, my mother came west under similar circumstances. But that doesn't explain why you offered me this position." Isaac turned to face her directly. "I saw something in you, Miss Keating, a resilience. Out here, that's the quality that matters most." His words warmed her in a way she wasn't prepared for. "Thank you for your faith in me." "I'll do my best not to disappoint." "I don't believe you will." He tipped his hat slightly. "Good night, Miss Keating." As he walked away toward the bunkhouse, Lillian remained on the porch, contemplating the vastness of the night sky and the unexpected turn her life had taken. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a curious sensation, not just relief or gratitude, but something like possibility. The following days passed in a whirl of activity as Lillian settled into life at Double Circle. Rebecca proved to be an excellent mentor, sharing her teaching materials and methods with enthusiasm. The schoolhouse, though simple, was well equipped with books, slates, and maps, evidence of Isaac's commitment to education. Each day brought new discoveries. Lillian learned that Eleanor had indeed come west as an indentured servant, eventually earning her freedom and marrying Samuel Iverson, an enterprising cattleman. Samuel had died 5 years earlier, leaving the ranch to Isaac, his only son. She discovered that Isaac, for all his taciturn manner, was deeply respected by everyone at Double Circle. He worked alongside his men from dawn until dusk, expecting no less from them than he did from himself. Yet he was also fair and generous, ensuring that even the lowest ranch hand had decent quarters and good food. "My brother reads more than anyone I know," Rebecca confided one afternoon as they organized books in the schoolhouse. "Poetry, history, philosophy, anything he can get his hands on. He orders books from back east and devours them by lamplight." This insight into Isaac's character intrigued Lillian. She began to notice the evidence of his intellectual curiosity, the well-worn books in the parlor, the newspapers from as far away as San Francisco and Chicago, the maps in his study marked with his neat handwriting. When classes resumed the following week, Lillian found herself thoroughly enjoying her role as teacher. The children, though less formally educated than their Eastern counterparts, were bright and eager to learn. Many had practical knowledge that surprised her. They could identify every plant and animal in the territory, calculate the weight of a steer by sight, and navigate by stars. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Lillian was returning from the schoolhouse when she encountered Isaac by the corral. He was working with a young horse, moving with a patience and gentleness that belied his physical strength. "You have a way with them," she observed. He glanced up, seemingly unsurprised by her presence. Horses respond to honesty. They know when you're afraid or uncertain. Like children, Lillian replied, they sense everything. Isaac smiled, one of his rare full smiles that transformed his serious face. How are you finding your pupils? Wonderful, she said sincerely. They have such curiosity about the world beyond Arizona. That was my hope in starting the school. He secured the corral gate and fell into step beside her as they walked toward the house. I was lucky enough to have a mother who valued learning, but many frontier children never get the chance. You've built something remarkable here, Mr. Iverson. Isaac, he corrected, just as he had that first day. If we're to be colleagues, I think we can dispense with formalities. Isaac, she amended, finding she liked the sound of his name on her lips. And you must call me Lillian. They had reached the porch steps, but neither moved to enter the house. The evening was mild, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Rebecca tells me you're doing excellently with the children, Isaac said. She's already planning to extend your duties after her confinement. I would be happy to continue, Lillian replied. I've grown quite attached to Double Circle. Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, approval, perhaps, or something warmer. I'm glad to hear it. We've grown rather attached to you as well. The simple statement shouldn't have affected her so strongly, but Lillian felt a flush rise to her cheeks. Thankfully, the deepening dusk concealed her reaction. Will you join us in the parlor this evening? Isaac asked. Mother has been attempting to teach Matthew chess with limited success. Your participation might save us all considerable amusement at his expense. Lillian laughed. I fear I'd be no help. I've never played chess. Then perhaps I could teach you, he offered. It's a game of strategy and patience, qualities I suspect you possess in abundance. There was something in his tone that made her heart beat a little faster. I would like that very much. That evening marked a subtle shift in their relationship. As Isaac patiently explained the movements of pawns and knights, their fingers occasionally brushing across the chessboard, Lillian found herself increasingly aware of him not just as her benefactor or employer, but as a man. And what a man he was: intelligent, principled, and possessed of a quiet strength that had nothing to do with his physical capabilities. When he spoke of his hopes for Double Circle or his views on the territory's future, his passion shone through his reserve. October brought cooler weather to the high country. The aspen trees turned gold against the evergreens, and morning frost glittered on the grass. Ranch activities shifted toward preparation for winter. Hay was stored, cattle moved to lower pastures, buildings repaired. Lillian settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings and early afternoons were devoted to teaching, while late afternoons often found her helping Rebecca prepare for her baby's arrival or assisting Alina with household management. Evenings were for reading, conversation, and increasingly frequent chess matches with Isaac. It was during one such match, with November's first snow falling gently outside, that Isaac revealed more of his past. I was 12 when Father brought us to this valley, he said, contemplating his next move. It was nothing but wilderness, then Apache hunting grounds. They didn't take kindly to our arrival. Were you afraid? Lillian asked, fascinated by this glimpse into his childhood. Terrified, he admitted. But Father made peace with them, traded fairly, respected their boundaries. When other ranchers wanted to drive them out, he refused to participate. His fingers hovered over a bishop before moving it decisively. It nearly cost him everything socially and financially, but he stood firm. That must have taken great courage. It taught me that doing right isn't always doing what's easy, Isaac said. His eyes met hers across the board. A lesson I've tried to remember. Lillian wondered if he was referring to her own rescue. Like standing up to men like Wilkes? Exactly so. He watched as she pondered her next move. I've made enemies by interfering with their operations, but I can't bring myself to regret it. Nor should you, she said firmly, moving her knight. You've changed lives, mine included. Something in her tone made him look up sharply. The intensity in his gaze caused her breath to catch. You've changed more than you know at Double Circle, Lillian, he said quietly. Check. She blinked, refocusing on the board to find her king threatened. As she studied her options, she was acutely aware of Isaac watching her, not just her moves, but her. Winter descended in earnest by early December. Snow blanketed the valley, transforming Double Circle into a pristine wonderland. Ranch work continued regardless of whether animals needed tending, fences required repair. Life went on. Lillian found herself increasingly drawn to Isaac's company. Their chess games had evolved into wide-ranging discussions of books, ideas, and experiences. She learned of his travels throughout the West, his dealings with territorial officials, his vision for Arizona's future. In turn, she shared stories of her life in Boston, her brief teaching career, her dreams before circumstances had so drastically altered her path. She never spoke directly of how she had come to be on Wilkes's wagon, and Isaac never pressed. But one evening, as they sat before the fire long after the others had retired, the words finally came. "My father died of consumption last spring," she began, watching the dancing flames rather than meeting Isaac's eyes. "What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that he had gambling debts, substantial ones." Isaac remained silent, giving her space to continue. The creditors came immediately. "Our house, our possessions, everything was seized. My mother had died years before, and I had no brothers or close male relatives to intervene." The memory still brought a bitter taste to her mouth. A man named Hargrove offered a solution. He would clear the debts if I agreed to a 7-year contract of service with an associate of his in the West. "Wilkes," Isaac supplied grimly. Lillian nodded. "I had little choice. It was that or debtor's prison. I signed the papers, thinking I was agreeing to legitimate employment. It wasn't until we were days into the journey that I realized the truth: we weren't employees but property. Our contracts would be sold to the highest bidder when we reached Arizona." "Did they?" Isaac hesitated. "Were you mistreated on the journey?" She understood his unspoken concern. "Wilkes was cruel but careful not to damage his merchandise. We were denied basic comforts, fed barely enough to keep us alive, but not violated." She swallowed hard. "Others on previous transports weren't so fortunate, according to Mary." Isaac's hands had clenched into fists, his knuckles white. "Men like Wilkes deserve far worse than they typically receive." "What happened to him?" Lillian asked, realizing she had never thought to inquire. 6 months in the territorial prison for fraud and transportation of persons under false pretenses," Isaac replied. "It should have been longer, but the law has gaps when it comes to such matters." They sat in companionable silence for a time, the crackling fire the only sound. "Thank you," Lillian finally said. "For what? For listening. For not judging." She met his gaze directly. "For seeing me as more than a victim or a charity case." Isaac reached across the space between their chairs, his hand covering hers. "Lillian, I have never seen you as anything but extraordinary." The warmth of his touch, the sincerity in his voice, it was overwhelming. Before she could respond, the grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight, breaking the moment. Isaac withdrew his hand reluctantly. "It's late. You should rest." As they bid each other good night, Lillian knew something fundamental had shifted between them. The question was what it meant and what would come of it. Rebecca's baby arrived 3 days before Christmas, a healthy boy she and Matthew named Samuel, after Isaac's father. The birth was difficult but ultimately successful, thanks to the skills of Maria and Alina, who had delivered countless babies over the years. With Rebecca confined to bed rest, Lillian took on additional responsibilities with both the school and household. She found herself working closely with Isaac to prepare for the ranch's traditional Christmas celebration, an event that included not just the family but all the ranch hands and their families. "We've done this every year since I was a boy," Isaac explained as they decorated the main house with pine boughs and red ribbons. "Father believed that everyone at Double Circle was family of a sort." On Christmas Eve, the great room filled with people, cowboys and their wives, children from the school. neighbors from smaller ranches miles away who had braved the snow for the occasion. Maria and her helpers had prepared a feast that covered 2 long tables, and everyone ate until they couldn't manage another bite. After the meal came music. One of the cowboys played fiddle, another accordion, and Matthew surprised everyone with his fine tenor as he led the singing of carols. Gifts were exchanged, mostly practical items but wrapped with care and received with genuine appreciation. Lillian, watching the celebration from a quiet corner, felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. These people, many of whom had been strangers 3 months ago, now felt like family. "Happy?" Isaac's voice came from beside her. He had approached so quietly she hadn't noticed. "Very," she admitted. "This is wonderful, Isaac." "I have something for you," he said, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "It isn't much, but—" Lillian carefully unwrapped it to reveal a book, a collection of poetry by Iverson, beautifully bound in leather. "I remembered you mentioning he was your favorite," Isaac said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "It's perfect," she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "But I have nothing for you. Your presence at Double Circle is gift enough," he replied. Then, seeming to gather his courage, he added, "Would you walk with me?" Just for a moment, curious, Lillian fetched her shawl and followed him onto the porch. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant against the black sky. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Isaac led her to the edge of the porch, where hanging from the roof beam was a sprig of mistletoe. "An old tradition," he said softly, "though perhaps presumptuous of me." Lillian's heart raced. Not presumptuous at all. With gentle deliberation, Isaac drew her into his arms. His kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, her arms sliding around his neck, the kiss deepened into something more certain. When they finally parted, Isaac kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks." "Why didn't you?" she asked, breathless. "I feared it was too soon, that you might feel obligated because of your position here." Lillian drew back slightly to see his face. "Isaac Iverson, do you really think I'm the kind of woman who does anything out of mere obligation?" A smile spread across his features. "No, I suppose you're not. Good." She pulled him down for another kiss, this one leaving no doubt about her feelings. They might have continued indefinitely had Alina not called from the doorway. "Isaac, Lillian, the children want to perform their recitation." Reluctantly, they separated. Isaac kept her hand in his as they returned to the celebration, and Lillian noticed the knowing smiles exchanged between Alina and Rebecca. The days following Christmas brought a noticeable change in Isaac and Lillian's relationship. They no longer hid their growing affection, though they remained appropriately discreet. Alina clearly approved, often finding reasons to leave them alone together. Rebecca was more direct, telling Lillian outright that she'd never seen her brother so happy. January brought harsh weather blizzards that kept everyone close to home and made ranch work a constant battle against the elements. Isaac spent long days in the snow and bitter cold, checking on cattle, delivering feed, ensuring the survival of the herd. Lillian worried for him, especially when he returned late one evening, exhausted and chilled to the bone after rescuing a group of stranded calves. "You'll make yourself ill," she scolded gently as she helped him warm himself by the fire. "Concerned for my welfare, Miss Keating." He teased, though his voice was rough with fatigue. "Very much so, Mr. Iverson." She handed him a cup of hot coffee laced with whiskey. "I've grown rather attached to you," his eyes softened. "And I to you, Lillian, more than I can properly express." February brought a gradual thaw and the first hints that spring would eventually return. Ranch activity increased as preparations began for the calving season and spring roundup. Lillian's school continued to thrive, with 2 new pupils joining when a family moved into the abandoned Peterson place 5 miles downriver. One crisp Saturday morning, Isaac invited Lillian to ride with him to check the eastern boundary of the property. "It's a fair distance," he warned. But the view from Eagle Ridge is worth the journey. Lillian had become a competent rider during her months at Double Circle, though she still preferred the gentle mare Isaac had assigned to her over the spirited stallion he rode. They set out after breakfast, packed lunch secured in their saddlebags. The day was perfect for riding clear skies, mild temperature, the landscape beginning to show the first faint green of approaching spring. As they rode, Isaac pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the land's history, both recent and ancient. By midday, they had reached Eagle Ridge, a dramatic outcropping of rock that overlooked the entire valley. Below them spread the Double Circle Ranch, looking like a child's toy from this height. Beyond it, the mountains rose in successive ranges, fading to blue in the distance. They dismounted to enjoy their lunch in the shelter of a large boulder. As they ate, Isaac seemed thoughtful, almost nervous, unusual for a man typically so self-possessed. "Is something troubling you?" Lillian finally asked. Isaac set aside his half-eaten sandwich. "Not troubling, no, but I've been considering something important." He took a deep breath. "Lillian, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life," her heart quickened. "For me as well. When I found you on that wagon road, I had no intention beyond seeing justice done," he continued. "I certainly never imagined I would find someone who would come to mean so much to me." "Isaac," he reached for her hands, holding them in his. "I know it hasn't been long by conventional standards. If you feel it's too soon, I'll understand. But I can't imagine my life without you now." Lillian could scarcely breathe as she realized what was happening. "Lillian Keating, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy surged through her with such force she felt lightheaded. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Isaac," his face transformed with relief and happiness. He drew her to him, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally separated, both breathless, Isaac reached into his pocket and produced a small box. Inside was a ring of sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, set in gold. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "Father gave it to her when he could finally afford to buy her something beautiful." "It's perfect," Lillian whispered, admiring how it caught the sunlight. They spent the afternoon on the ridge, making plans for their future. Isaac spoke of improvements he wanted to make to the ranch, of expanding the school to serve more children, of perhaps building a proper house for them after they were married. "Though I'm perfectly happy in the main house if you prefer," he added. "Mother would love having you there permanently." "I love Alina," Lillian said, "but I think we might want our own home eventually." She blushed slightly. "Especially if we're blessed with children." Isaac's eyes darkened at the thought. "I would like that very much." The ride back to the ranch seemed to take no time at all, their conversation flowing easily as they discussed wedding plans. They agreed on a spring ceremony once the worst of mud season had passed, but before the demands of summer ranching took over. Alina's joy at their news was immediate and effusive. She embraced Lillian, tears in her eyes. "I had hoped for this from the moment Isaac told us about you." Rebecca was equally delighted, already making plans for the wedding despite still recovering from childbirth. Even little Samuel seemed to approve, gurgling happily when Lillian held him. The ranch hands offered their congratulations with varying degrees of formality, though all seemed genuinely pleased. Lillian realized she had truly been accepted as part of Double Circle, not just as the schoolteacher, but as a valued member of the community. News traveled quickly in the territory. Within days, visitors began arriving at the ranch, neighbors offering congratulations, women from Fort Bowie bringing small gifts, even Sheriff Palmer making the journey to express his good wishes. "You've made a fine match, Miss Keating," the sheriff told her. "Isaac Iverson is the best man in these parts." "I believe you're right, Sheriff," she replied, catching Isaac's eye across the room and sharing a private smile. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with preparations. Alina and Maria took charge of planning the feast, while Rebecca helped Lillian create a wedding dress from fine fabric ordered from Tucson. The entire ranch seemed caught up in the excitement, with even the most hardened cowboys contributing in their own ways. One carved a beautiful wooden box as a wedding gift. Another composed a song to be played at the celebration. As April arrived, bringing green to the valley and warmth to the air, Lillian found herself reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. Less than a year ago, she had been facing a future of servitude and despair. Now she was preparing to marry a man she loved deeply, surrounded by people who had become family. "Penny for your thoughts," Isaac said one evening as they walked along Eagle Creek, the water high with spring runoff. "I was just thinking about how much can change in a year," she replied. "Last April I was in Boston, watching my father's possessions being auctioned to pay his debts." Isaac squeezed her hand. "And this April I'm happier than I ever thought possible." She stopped walking to face him. "I love you, Isaac Iverson, more than I have words to express." His kiss was tender, a promise of all they would share. "I love you too, Lillian, and I will spend my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret that," she assured him. "Not in 1,000 years." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, as if nature itself approved of the union. The ceremony was held outdoors, beneath an arbor Isaac and the ranch hands had constructed beside Eagle Creek. Flowers gathered from the surrounding hills decorated every surface, their fragrance filling the air. Lillian wore her new dress cream-colored cotton with lace trim, simple but elegant. Eleanor had lent her a pearl necklace that had been in the Iverson family for generations, and Rebecca had woven wildflowers into her golden hair. As she walked toward Isaac, who waited beneath the arbor with the circuit-riding preacher, Lillian felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged with this man, in this place that had become home. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken clearly for all to hear. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac's kiss held both tenderness and promise, drawing good-natured cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. There was food and music, dancing and laughter. Lillian danced not only with her new husband but with Matthew, Sheriff Palmer, and several of the ranch hands, each of whom treated her with a respect that touched her deeply. As the evening waned, Isaac led her away from the celebration toward the small cabin that had been prepared for them. It stood a short distance from the main house, close enough to be convenient but far enough to offer privacy. The interior was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture, and a large bed covered with Eleanor's best quilt. "Welcome home, Mrs. Iverson," Isaac said as he carried her across the threshold. The name sent a thrill through her. "Mrs. Iverson," she repeated. "I like the sound of that, as do I." His voice had deepened, his eyes reflecting the same desire she felt. With gentle hands, he began to remove the flowers from her hair. "You were the most beautiful bride Arizona Territory has ever seen." "And you the most handsome groom," she replied, reaching up to loosen his tie. Their first night as husband and wife was everything Lillian had dreamed it might be: tender at times, passionate at others, always filled with the deep connection they had built over the months of their courtship. Isaac was a considerate lover, attentive to her needs, patient with her inexperience. By morning, they had discovered a new dimension to their relationship, one that promised a lifetime of shared joy. Spring flowed into summer, and life at Double Circle found a new rhythm. Lillian continued teaching, though now as Mrs. Iverson rather than Miss Keating. She also took on more responsibilities in managing the ranch, learning from Eleanor about everything from cattle breeding records to supply inventories. Isaac thrived with Lillian at his side. Together, they implemented improvements to the ranch operations, expanding irrigation to increase hay production, introducing new breeding stock to improve the herd, establishing a small orchard that would eventually provide fruit for the ranch. Their life wasn't without challenges. Summer brought drought that threatened the grazing lands and required constant vigilance to ensure adequate water for the cattle. A band of rustlers operating in the territory necessitated armed patrols of the ranch boundaries. Territorial politics occasionally demanded Isaac's presence in Tucson for days at a time, separations that both found difficult. But through it all, their partnership only strengthened. They faced each challenge together, supporting one another, finding solutions where others might have seen only problems. By autumn, Lillian had news that brought fresh joy to Double Circle. "A baby," Eleanor exclaimed when Lillian and Isaac shared their expectation. "Another grandchild. Samuel will have a cousin close to his age." Rebecca was equally delighted. "Our children will grow up together, just as Isaac and I did." The entire ranch celebrated the news. Maria immediately began knitting baby clothes, while the Cowboys built a cradle as a gift. Even the children at school were excited, offering suggestions for names and volunteering to help once the baby arrived. Winter came early that year, with heavy snow blanketing the valley by late November. The ranch settled into its cold weather routine, focusing on maintaining the herd through the harsh conditions. Lillian's pregnancy progressed well, though she found the confinement of winter sometimes challenging. Isaac was attentive to her comfort, ensuring she had books to read, visitors to entertain her, and frequent reports on ranch activities to keep her connected to the larger world of Double Circle. On a frigid January night with snow falling heavily outside, Lillian went into labor. Eleanor and Maria took charge, having delivered countless babies between them. Isaac paced anxiously outside the bedroom door, joined occasionally by Matthew, who offered the solidarity of experience. After 6 hours of labor relatively quick for a first child, according to Eleanor, Lillian gave birth to a healthy son. When Isaac was finally allowed to enter the room, he found his wife tired but radiant, holding their swaddled infant. "Meet your son, Isaac," she said, tears of joy in her eyes. Isaac took the tiny bundle with reverent hands. "He's perfect," he whispered, overcome with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Samuel Thomas Iverson, Samuel for Isaac's father, Thomas for Lillian's. From his first days, it was clear young Sam had inherited his father's strong constitution and his mother's inquisitive nature. He became the center of their world, bringing new purpose and joy to their already happy life. Spring arrived with renewed energy at Double Circle. With Sam nearly 3 months old, Lillian began gradually resuming her duties, bringing him with her to the schoolhouse where the older children delighted in helping care for him. On a warm May morning, Isaac suggested they ride to Eagle Ridge, the site of his proposal exactly 1 year earlier. Maria agreed to watch Sam for a few hours, and they set out after breakfast, enjoying the freedom of being alone together. The valley was lush with spring growth, wildflowers carpeting the meadows, the creek running full with snowmelt. As they climbed toward the ridge, Lillian reflected on all that had happened since she had first seen Fort Bowie from Wilkes's wagon. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked as they reached the summit. "About how differently my life might have gone if you hadn't stopped that wagon," she replied honestly. "If you hadn't said those words." "You're free now," he recalled softly. Lillian nodded. 3 simple words that changed everything. Isaac dismounted and helped her down from her horse. They stood together on the ridge, overlooking the ranch that was now truly their home. "Are you happy, Lillian?" he asked, his arm around her waist. She leaned into him, contentment filling her. "Happier than I ever imagined possible. I have you, Sam, this beautiful place. What more could I want?" "Perhaps a daughter next time," he suggested with a smile. Lillian laughed. "Perhaps, though not quite yet. Let's enjoy Sam a while longer before giving him a sister." They spread a blanket on a flat rock and shared the lunch Maria had packed for them. As they ate, they talked of the future plans for the ranch, for the school, for their growing family. "I've been thinking of expanding the schoolhouse," Isaac said. "More families are moving into the valley and we'll need room for additional pupils." "A larger library would be wonderful," Lillian suggested, "and perhaps a proper playground for the children." Their discussion continued, dreams and practical considerations intermingling as they planned the years ahead. This was what Lillian treasured most about their partnership, the way they built their future together, each contributing ideas, each respecting the other's vision. As the sun began its westward descent, they reluctantly packed up to return to the ranch. Before mounting their horses, Isaac drew Lillian into his arms for a lingering kiss. "Thank you," he said when they parted. "For what?" "For saying yes. For making Double Circle truly a home, for Sam." His eyes held hers, filled with love. "For everything." Lillian touched his face gently. "Thank you for making me free, Isaac. Not just from Wilkes, but free to become who I was meant to be." They rode back to the ranch as the afternoon light gilded the landscape. From the ridge, Lillian could see the entire valley spread before them, the main house where Alina would be waiting, the schoolhouse where she had found her calling, the cabin she and Isaac had made their home, the corrals and barns and outbuildings that comprised Double Circle. And beyond the immediate boundaries of the ranch lay the vast territory that had once seemed so alien and was now beloved. Arizona in all its wild beauty had become her home, its people her people, its future intertwined with her own. As they approached the ranch yard, Lillian could see Maria on the porch with Sam in her arms. The baby's delighted sounds carried on the breeze as he spotted his parents returning. "He recognizes us," Lillian said, pleased. "Of course he does," Isaac replied proudly. "He's an Iverson after all." Sharp as they come. They dismounted in the yard and Maria brought Sam to his mother's waiting arms. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for Lillian's face with tiny hands. "Did you miss us, little man?" she cooed, breathing in his sweet scent. "He was perfect," Maria reported. "A true angel." Isaac took the horses to the stable while Lillian carried Sam into the house. Alina greeted them with her usual warmth, eager to hear about their excursion. That evening, after Sam had been fed and settled in his cradle, Lillian and Isaac sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "I was thinking today about fate," Lillian said, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder. "How the worst moment of my life being put on that wagon led me to the best moments." Isaac's arm tightened around her. "I prefer to think it wasn't fate, but courage, yours in surviving, mine in acting when others might have looked away." "Perhaps both," she conceded. "Either way, I'm grateful for how it turned out." From inside came the soft sounds of Sam stirring in his sleep. Soon he would wake for his evening feeding and their quiet moment would end. But that was part of the joy of their life now, the beautiful interruptions, the constant reminders of how rich their world had become. "I love you, Isaac Iverson," Lillian said, turning to face him. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days to come." His kiss was both answer and promise of continued passion, enduring partnership, and the shared journey that stretched before them. As darkness settled fully over Double Circle, Lillian knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. From indentured servant to beloved wife, mother, and teacher, her journey had been unexpected but perfect in its outcome. She was free, truly free in all the ways that mattered. And in that freedom, she had found a love and a life beyond anything she could have imagined on that fateful day when a tall cowboy had stopped a wagon and changed her world forever. 5 years later, Double Circle Ranch had flourished beyond even Isaac's ambitious vision. The main house had been expanded to accommodate the growing extended family. The school now served 28 children from throughout the valley, with Lillian still serving as head teacher, assisted by a young woman from Tucson. The cattle operation had nearly doubled, making the Iversons one of the most prosperous families in the territory. Young Sam, now 5 years old, was joined by his 3-year-old sister, Alina Jane, called Ellie by everyone, and 6-month-old brother William. The children thrived in the ranch environment, with Sam already showing his father's affinity for horses and Ellie demonstrating her mother's love of books. One summer evening, as the family gathered on the expanded porch of the main house for dinner, Sheriff Palmer arrived with unexpected news. "Thought you'd want to know, Isaac," he said after accepting a glass of lemonade. "James Wilkes died yesterday in Yuma prison." A momentary silence fell over the gathering. It had been years since anyone had spoken that name, though Lillian had never forgotten it. What happened? Isaac finally asked. "Consumption, from what I hear," the sheriff replied. He'd been transferred to Yuma 2 years ago after trying to escape from Tucson. Lillian felt Isaac's eyes on her, gauging her reaction. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for letting us know, Sheriff." Later, as they put the children to bed in their family cabin, Isaac broached the subject again. "Are you all right, Lillian? The news about Wilkes." She considered the question honestly. "I am. His death changes nothing about my life. But I can't help thinking about the women who weren't as fortunate as I was, the ones he transported before me, the ones who never found freedom." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "I've been working with Judge Holbrook on legislation to close the loopholes that allowed men like Wilkes to operate. It's slow progress, but we're making headway." "That's what matters," Lillian said, watching as he tucked the blanket around sleeping William. "That fewer women will suffer as I might have." Their lives had expanded beyond Double Circle in recent years. Isaac now served on the Territorial Council, advocating for ranchers' interests, but also for progressive reforms. Lillian had become involved in efforts to establish proper schools throughout Arizona, occasionally traveling to Tucson or Phoenix to speak at educational conferences. Yet their foundation remained the ranch and their family. No matter what outside responsibilities they undertook, Double Circle was always their center, their true home. The following morning, Lillian rose early, as was her habit. She loved the quiet moments before the household stirred, the peaceful beauty of dawn breaking over the valley. Standing on the porch with her coffee, she watched the first golden light touch the distant mountains. Isaac joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Good morning, Mrs. Iverson?" "Good morning, Mr. Iverson," she replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. Even after 5 years of marriage, his touch still sent a pleasant shiver through her. "I've been thinking," he said, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Perhaps it's time for that trip to San Francisco we've been discussing. The children are old enough to travel, and Mother and Rebecca would enjoy the adventure." Lillian turned in his arms, surprised. "Really? What about the ranch? Matthew can manage things for a few weeks. We've built a good team here." His smile was both tender and mischievous. "Besides, I promised to show you the world, remember? San Francisco seems a reasonable place to start." The idea was thrilling. Though Lillian had embraced ranch life completely, she still occasionally missed the cultural amenities of a city: theaters, libraries, museums. "I'd love that," she said. "When?" "After the fall roundup. We could take the train from Tucson, be in California before the rainy season begins." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "The children would see the ocean." The thought of Sam and Ellie experiencing the sea for the first time filled her with anticipation. "Yes, let's do it." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of small feet pattering across the floor inside, followed by Ellie's voice calling, "Mama, Papa." "Out here, sweetheart," Lillian called. Their daughter appeared in the doorway, her dark hair inherited from Isaac tousled from sleep, her blue eyes so like her mother's, bright with the energy of a new day. "Can we have pancakes?" she asked hopefully. Isaac scooped her up, settling her on his hip. "I believe that can be arranged." "Shall we go wake your brothers?" As Isaac carried Ellie inside, Lillian lingered a moment longer on the porch. The sun had fully cleared the horizon now, bathing Double Circle in clear morning light. Ranch hands were already moving about the yard, beginning their daily tasks. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, where a leaner would be supervising breakfast preparations. This was the life she had built with Isaac, a life rich in love, purpose, and possibility. What had begun with those 3 transformative words, "You're free now," had evolved into something far beyond freedom. It had become belonging in its purest form. With a heart full of gratitude, Lillian turned to join her family, ready to embrace whatever the new day might bring to the home and the people she loved beyond measure.